Hi, everyone. Here I'm today talking about reaching scale on a Hadoop platform. Lessons from a journey of speed and agility, or not so much, but we'll see how we get on. So I'm Nikki Bullivant. There's my picture. I'm head of data engineering in Santander Technology. For those who don't know Santander as a group, Santander UK is a wholly owned part of the Santander group. We have more than 20,000 employees in the UK, over 14 million active customers, over 1,000 branches and 50 corporate centres, and geographically we're quite diverse. So I started the big data journey in 2014, I should say late 2014, so I didn't waste the first part of the year. So I'm responsible for a lot of the things we're going to talk about today, so the good things and the bad things. Anush's picture is not on this slide because he's a surprise guest presenter. So Anush, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Good afternoon, guys. My name is Anuj Sharma, and I'm Head of Big Data Infrastructure Services in Santander Technology. I'm responsible for managing the end-to-end infrastructure services for the big data ecosystem, and we are responsible for managing our customer data lake and our technical log lake, and we work very closely with the engineering team. I'm sure you guys are having a good time, and I hope you enjoyed the keynote speech. It's a very interesting topic that we want to cover today, and the lessons learned, and I hope you guys can have some really good takeaways from this session. Nikki.
So just a bit of a summary about who Santander are. So I think it's fair to describe us as a traditional bank with a culture of retail banking. It's been born over 150 years worth of experience. Through acquisition, so I was part of the original team that was part of one of the banks we acquired. So through acquisition, we've grown to the 5th largest bank in the UK. And what's interesting about Santander, I think, in particular, compared to some of our competitors, is we have a core banking platform that's common across all of our different parts of the group. So I can go and work with another colleague from Chile or from Brazil, and we could be talking about the same core banking platform, and we've implemented that globally. So why are we changing? Well, there are many contenders in our market now. You know, when we talk about payments, PayPal was an old one now, but there are lots of people that are moving into our space. And so a digital transformation, I'm sure many companies are talking about digital transformation, but a digital transformation is mandatory for us, and part of that is becoming a data-driven organization. So I'm going to describe our data transformation journey. So I'm sure many of you have started in exactly the same place or have yet to start, but we started off as a proof of concept back in September 2014. There were a few of us selected within the bank, and we were put away in a room in another building, secret, away from everybody else, and we were there to discover what big data could do for us, whether the collection of crazy animals, were we ready for it? Were they enterprise ready yet? So I can honestly say that was the most fun I've ever had at work. It was 3 months of playing and really discovering all of this new open source community and learning all the different projects. We tested all of the basic components at that point, and we fed our findings back to our stakeholders. We then realized that as technologists, we shouldn't be working on our own in this space. Data needs more than just technologists. So we started working with our fraud analytics team. Now, I think organizationally, they're the closest thing that I would describe to a data scientist at that point. So we explored different data matters that we have within the organization and decided that our audit logs were the most interesting piece of unexplored data that we had. You know, we were doing a little bit of work, but the depth of the data was so vast that a traditional database wouldn't allow our fraud team to do what they needed to do in that space. So very, very quickly we took those discoveries, productionized them, and created new opportunities for the bank. And what also should be said at this point, when we provisioned our proof of concept 10-node cluster with 100 terabytes of storage, we thought that was a lot. It's not a lot. We filled it up in, I think, 2 to 3 weeks. And so the first lesson that I'm going to say from this journey is don't take your cluster over the 70% full line. It doesn't like it. So at this point in our journey, we decided to release a customer-facing application. So we built an application to partner the launch of Apple Pay in the UK. So Spendlytics is our showcase application. It was the first thing that we truly went live with. It's an application that allows our banking customers to monitor and see their card transaction in near real time. We perform aggregations and trends on the fly. This is all served from our, what we would call at that point, our operational cluster. So we had an architecture that included Flume, Kafka, Hbase. We also used our analytics data lake as well. So authorization data, so I don't know how many people know how cards work, but basically what happens is you get an authorization, and at a later point you get a settlement. So the two pieces of data need to come together. So Spendlytics in real time uses the authorization, so what we would call your pending transactions. And then using a Lambda architecture, we then bring batch data, because that's how we receive settlements, through our analytics data lake, and then distribute copy up to our operational cluster, and then settle the transaction. So in order to go live to customer, we had to build a resilient, highly available data architecture, because obviously you can't serve your customers with something that's a bit flaky. So that was the thing that made us be production ready. It was also the thing that let the secret out, because in terms of publicity, we went live to our colleagues via the App Store. So at that point, our colleagues suddenly thought big data's magic, because nobody had seen, well, certainly nobody within our organization had seen what we could do with data in that way. And because we did it so quietly and so quickly, big data is magic. So we opened up our data lake for our analytics community, and we started establishing growth. I think at this point it's good to say that, you know, I knew all of our data curious colleagues at that point by name. They all had individual training sessions. We made sure that everybody knew what this big data and what it was all about. But the community really started growing. I think from the keynote this morning, that was a very similar story. So scaling up, expansion of data, yes. How much data? When you've got all the data? That's another question. So we were trying to define a model where we would only bring data when we can perceive and bring and identify value from it. So we were bringing original documented data, and part of bringing original documented data, is you need to understand the metadata associated to the data you're bringing. And we define originality by where the operational system where the data is created. So this is very raw, operational form data. And we need to have principles in this space. I think with the advent of GDPR, I think that these principles were good to have from the beginning. But all of our data in our lake is documented. We have an established data ownership. We have our CDO team involved. We certify that we have a true and accurate copy of the original source system. Now, all of that's governance, and all of that takes time. But I think that what it then means is that, you know, we're saying that this data is for the good of everybody. We're trying to build a lake. We're trying to build a community. We're trying to share. And everyone needs to treat that resource as the valuable commodity that it is. So where are we going? So the purpose of having a data lake is to understand our customers, having a holistic view of how to serve them better and what do they need. Understanding our bank and how we operate and how we can create efficiency. I think generation of cost efficiency as well. You know, I don't know about other people's organizations, but I hear the same story over and over again about how people find within their end user computing communities that they're all creating the same thing over and over again. It's about agility and speed, because if we bring the data in for one use case that we've delivered value in, the next use case that needs that data already has that pre-certified, authorized copy, and they're good to go. I think it's about creating actionable insights. So once you've built your foundations, you can start building analytics at speed and agility and creating actions. It's not about generating a spreadsheet to then send around the organization in an email. And I think that one of the most important things that we're doing as well is we're having consistent reporting to our regulators. And whilst that doesn't sound like that should be a hard thing, when you have multiple data warehouses within an organization, each data warehouse may have a different source of their data, it may have a different timeliness, and our regulators are becoming far more data aware as well. So I think that creating that consistent view makes our lives easier, and also we're quicker to respond. So, Anush.
Thank you, Nikki. Exciting times. In any organization, you guys know, most of you in an, in an enterprise organization knows that when you initially set up an environment, you are very excited about it, and you want the environment to serve the purpose that you're built for. But what people tend to forget at times is that more and more interest is generated on that environment. People want to really leverage that environment. And we at times, in this day and age where agile, product teams, tribes, and we just focus on delivering projects. We are very, we get digressed from platform capacity, and we are so focused, no, I want to get this project delivered. But what it leads to is that people forget that fundamentally, with the amount of interest that you're generating on your platform, you need to keep growing, you need to performance tune your environment, and you need to scale up on demand. And how do you keep up to that? That's an interesting challenge. In the last 3 years, we have grown phenomenally. I mean, if you talk about our users on the data lake, right from initially from 10, 20 users, now we have over 1,000 users who are using it, and that caused us multiple issues.
It was really fast when there's only 10 of us.
It was very fast. And suddenly you have people, complaining, oh, my query is not running, oh, I have resource contentions. And in our organization, we typically, as Nikki mentioned, we have an analytic cluster which is on 98 nodes, and it has almost 4.2 petabyte capacity. And we have 2 data centers called DC1 and DC2. And one runs as an active cluster, one runs as a passive cluster. And in that one cluster, active cluster, we do ingestion, transformation, and it is used for visualization tools, and the data scientist community is also using that. Over a period of time, we realized initially that served the purpose perfectly well. There were no resource contentions, there were no problems at all, and things were hunky-dory. But as soon as we started going, the number of jobs were increasing by the hour, by the minute. We started facing issues where people were complaining, the data scientist communities were complaining about problems in the environment. You can see these numbers. These numbers speak for themselves, you know. We have grown tremendously, but we couldn't keep up, you know, initially with the demand of our data science community or of our data analytics community, who really were asking for resources. So we sat back and said, we have one cluster here, passive cluster, doing nothing. Why don't we really leverage that cluster and the resources which are available on it? So what did we do? We went in and said, ingestion and transformation, we'll do it on one cluster. And if people want to do data analytics, it will be done on DC2. Now, it presents a challenge. Some of these people want real-time data. Yeah, some of these data scientists want real-time data. If they want, they can stick to the DC1 cluster, which is our active cluster, and people who are looking at historic data can actually work in total isolation in DC2, where they are not contending with any resources. I mean, the challenges we had over time have been tremendous. In HDFS use cases, people, you know, oh, there is a data lake. Design principle says put everything in the data lake. Guys, we need to look at the use case. Does it really mean, you know, is it the right solution? You ingest small files, you have problems with BDR replication. The more objects you have, the longer it starts taking in the replication. We have problems, with Navigator, using Navigator. We are a Cloudera shop, and we had problems using the Navigator as well. Also, we found problem, Hive has been the biggest issue for us. The more metadata that we had in Hive, the replication became slower and slower. Over a period of time, we have over 22,000 tables in there, and it was taking over 12 hours to replicate. The HDFS replication happened, but we had problems in Hive. So, you know, these are some of the stumbling blocks that we came across, and over a period of time, we have worked towards to provide that best performance to the people and to the community. But on and on, we have to keep looking at, performance tuning our environment, looking at best practices to follow. We cannot ignore those things. I mean, even applying on Sentry, we had issues where we had to run manual scripts to do things because there were limitations on the platform. And the other challenge we have is the upgrade process. How do we go and upgrade in total isolation, not disrupting our current users of the data lake? How do you do that in a transparent manner? So what we did is we decided that we will create a migration cluster where we would go and do testing of any upgrades that we do on the platform, so that it is completely transparent, and we have gone through the process of actually going through the migration exercise, so that when we do it in our pre-prod or production environment, it's transparent. We followed a complete implementation plan, which you looked at backing up all our databases and also backing up our Hive metastore, and going through a very rigorous process. And that makes it very transparent. But again, the challenge we get in there is not the upgrade of the platform. It is the people, it's the transformation jobs, it's the jobs which people have written on it that presents a challenge. Because you know what? Oh, after the upgrade, I was using that library and I have a issue with that. In the further slides, we'll tell you exactly how we evolved on that journey and how we improved that. Nikki?
Yeah, and I think part of the challenge here is naivety.
Yes.
So when we started this journey, we had principles, the original documented data principle. So we were trying to keep the costs as low as possible to the organization. So we already had unload files coming out of our mainframe. So we just took those files every single day, and we create partition after partition after partition. Because at some point we knew that we'd want to do time series analysis or something else with that data. And now we have maybe 2,000 copies of the same table with changes, So we've caused some of the issues ourselves, because speed and agility doesn't necessarily mean that you have gone back and fixed the wrongs of the past. And it's it's not the distant past, it's the recent past. So we've acquired technical debt in a very short period of time. And so now we have to re-architect our solutions. And GDPR has really helped out here, because I wrote the script, by the way, to do event-based architecture and slowly changing dimensions 3 years ago, but we never implemented it because we didn't really need it, and space was cheap, and we could keep on growing, and we've got all this other fun stuff to concentrate on. So now we are having to change that architecture. Upgrading, upgrade, upgrade, upgrade. Because you can rolling upgrade, right? I don't think you can, by the way. I love upgrading. It's one of my favorite subjects. So when we started this journey, we did do upgrades, and actually when you are the only users of the cluster, they're really easy to do, and you press a button and you download the parcels, and it all just happens like magic. But when you've got 1,000 people that will express their displeasure, and they will express their displeasure at you not making their cluster available to them, or you've got, I think, is it 4,500 jobs running a day?
Yeah, 5,000, yeah.
5,000 jobs a day. You can't just make that stop. And so upgrading is just exceptionally difficult. I mean, we know we've talked about creating a migration environment. We're still learning from this process.
Absolutely.
So there are lessons to be had here. There are definite lessons. And I'm hoping, we thought that when we started we were late adopters, and I don't think we really were. And I think that one of the advantages for people joining in now is the ecosystem, if you want to, the collection of products is more mature than where it was even 3 years ago, and is far more enterprise worthy. And I really wouldn't be surprised if people that are adopting these projects now, they could leapfrog us really quickly, because hopefully they're coming to talks like this and learning from others and not making the same mistakes. Or learning points. They're learning points. Yeah. So we've learned a lot. So yeah, as I was saying, we keep snapshots. We keep full snapshots of data. So we're just saying that's not good practice. No. In principle, it's great when you're playing around, but really it occupies too much space, creates a too large a memory footprint, and it's painful to manage. And when you're sharing that data with 1,000 users, don't expect them to remember the where clause to specify the partition. So when you start bringing billions of rows of data into memory, surprisingly nobody else on the cluster can join in. So that's another lesson that we've had to share with our community. So we've said, so what we're doing right now is we're implementing a change data capture, and you need to have the right tools to do that and the right tool for the job. We tried incremental copies from systems. I mean, my background in data warehousing told me that was not a good idea. I tried it again. I still don't like it. Change data capture, the only way that I can truly make this enterprise-worthy and make our data scientists happy is to assure that I have got every single change. Anush.
Automation is a key factor for any organization. Anything you do more than once has to be automated. And I mean, this is something I'm saying you all know more than me. I mean, we all try to automate as much as we can. For us, the key thing was how do we really automate our upgrades or our new installation. So we created Ansible playbooks, we had Rundeck, and we would go and create a cluster in less than half an hour now. Earlier it was a 5 to 6 hour process, and now we have gone and created Ansible playbooks, and it does it for us. The other challenge we found is during the upgrade processes, as Nikki mentioned, the key thing that we struggled with was the developers which had their transformation jobs and everything. How do we test them? That was a very big challenge. So what we did is we are working with our testing team, and we have created task testing as a service where people use Selenium, Cucumber, and they have automated the testing of their jobs so that they certify the jobs on their migration clusters to say before we go to the upgrade process, their jobs are certified in the new version of the cluster, and it's working as expected. So that gives them the confidence that post-upgrade we would not get teething issues. There's no point we upgrade and we find over 2,500 jobs are still failing and we have a problem. So automating that part has reduced that footprint. Earlier it was almost a 2-month exercise getting all the developers on board or the product teams on board to certify their jobs. Now with that automated, that's completed in less than 2 weeks. So that's a phenomenal achievement for us, and our whole upgrade cycle has reduced significantly. Also, what we realize in this journey is that the CI/CD pipelines, we created a CI/CD pipelines for our Hadoop. A lot of people use it on the PaaS environment, they go and do it, but we created it for our Hadoop platform where, you're constantly installing these artifacts, and we said it has to be automated. Not only we created the CI/CD pipeline, we have also created a dashboard using Elk and Kibana, where we say how many people are adapting that CI/CD pipeline and how many people are really using that pipeline. And we are getting stats from Jenkins, and we have created real-time metrics within our Kibana dashboard to present that. So it gives visibility to people that what they are doing and are they doing it well. Also, in terms of governance and data certification, our governance and data certification team have written their own custom or automated certification tools. We are looking at other products as well, which can do for us. And that has significantly, again, reduced the time of certifying the data, because that was another challenge, that the certification of data used to take very long post-ingestion. Now with the automation, that whole process has reduced significantly.
Yeah,
Nikki.
and one of the other things we're looking at as well is, making sure that our data content, we can feed back some machine learning back to our data governance, our chief data officers team, to say, this data looks like this data, is it the same? Because, identifying duplication is important as well. So I think in terms of advice to anyone that was starting this journey, I think that, I think it is what it is. Generate value quickly, but to identify those use cases that give your organization a wow, but, make it a quiet wow, not a really big wow. And then, because we went out with a big wow, and I think that we could have, I'm really grateful for all of the opportunities that Spendlytics has given me, but I think it was a bit too much wow. And I think that one of the other things that I would say there as well is that little bit of extra time that you needed to automate and to really harden what you're doing in production is going to be far more valuable in the long run than spending time on the next exciting thing, because you're going to keep on going back to that same subject. So one of the other things that we've done over a period of time is we've built our own frameworks. So when we identify patterns, so we have an ingestion framework. I don't buy anyone's products for that. We build it ourselves, because how many things can you do on an ingestion? You're going to create a table. You're going to insert into a table. You might standardize, but we've built our own product, and that serves 3,500-ish tables per day coming in. And it's the same piece of code. It's the same piece of software. So we've written it once, use it many. That's the principle. Write once, use many. So again, we've done some work around building frameworks for our teams, so to help them develop in Spark, because Spark isn't easy. Well, that's what they tell me anyway, but I think it's not so bad. But Spark on a big production platform isn't easy. So we've built some tooling to help them do that, and we issue that as a product. We've built an interface service. So again, I don't need to have people specialized, and we use the same piece of software over and over again, and it's all configurable. And each of these learnings helps us develop the next thing and do it better. Okay, and maintain the fresh water. It's a lake, it's a reservoir. Is it a swamp? I think not. And I think that especially the days of GDPR, I would hope that people that had data swamps have cleaned them up, or at least know what they've got in there now. The things that we thought were really, we really did spend a lot of time on governance and security at the beginning, and documenting our metadata, and that's one of the biggest complaints that the organization has got about us. We take too long, but what that does mean is that we have, hopefully, as clean as lake as possible. Yep. And one of the challenges, I think the biggest challenge, and I think, is cultural transformation. Us as technologists are really on board with this. We really are excited by this. But not everybody likes change, And that speed of change within the business is going to be slower than the speed of change in this environment. So, I think with value comes growth. Oh yeah, this is my boss's saying, and I think it's awesome. But so with value comes growth. He's going to be Spider-Man one day. Growth creates a challenge of scale. Scale requires planning and design. I'm not going to read the rest of it because you can all read. But you get the idea. So creating a story that's valuable and that offers your wow is the way to do it, but then I make people's lives, like Anush, really difficult because he has to support all of those little features that my team have added in. And unfortunately, between the pair of us, you know, the biggest challenge, we now have a dedicated customer experience team. Absolutely. Because I can't, you know, we got to the scale when you've got 1,000 users, you can't field those questions, and I think that's part of how do you build a team. And part of our team is built with ex-DBAs. Now, those ex-DBAs are really good at helping our users with their queries.
Yeah, and setting up an onboarding team primarily to help the user community to learn how to use and leverage the data lake.
So I think that, you know, I think in summary, by the way, I have put we are recruiting, as is everyone else. I saw the last slide deck as I was walking in, we are recruiting. I think that that's the unsaid challenge, by the way, in this space is recruiting. So scaling up big data with all the file systems, the metastore, the name node, that's one collection of problems. Getting the right skills and the right people in that space is almost for us a tougher problem. So, you know, more than happy to hear from any of you and keep in touch. But, you know, if there was a glut of big data developers on the market, you know, I wish I knew. So we've gone from 5 to, I say, 170 now?
Yeah, in your team, yeah.
You want to across teams?
Yeah, 60, yeah.
60, oh, okay, we're more now. We're over 200. So within 3 years, we've gone from 0 big data people to over 200 dedicated, and then across the organization, we have probably another 200 developers working this space. So it's busy.
Yep.
Right, done.
Q&A.
Any questions? Because I haven't got time.
I'll pass it.
Oh, you can solved it? No. What we did is we bought a product.
Yeah, we bought a product to help us to solve that problem.
We use Ab Initio.
Ab Initio.
So there are other ways to do it, by the way. When we went out from the beginning, we used QReplicator, which is part of your mainframe, and it's free, apart from the fact that it will cost a lot on MIPS.
Yeah. So the aim is dual, you know, change data capture and reducing the cost of the MIPS as well. So we went with Ab Initio, which is helping us to do that.
But we only use it in that particular space.
Yeah.
So there are other products in the market that do something very similar. Not right now. Until the regulator says it's okay for us to put our customer data in the cloud.
But we are on an evolution path, and we are looking at how we can evolve and be elastic in our growth in terms of the customer demand. So we are looking at solutions to split compute and storage. So this is something on our evolution path, absolutely.
Yeah, in the future, when we're allowed. From 0 to 9 months, now you're asking. Now you're asking me to remember which faces were still in the very small room. We started off with 5 of us, so all 5 quite senior people in the organization who are used to having teams. So the first thing I learned when I went to big data is I had to delegate to myself. And then we moved to about 25, 30, I think, within 9 months. But one of the mistakes we made at that point is we realized that we would need some young people, you know, because us older ones, you know, don't necessarily have all of the ideas. So we brought in some graduates really, really early on in our journey. but we didn't have enough maturity in the technology ourselves. So when I say 25, 30, there was probably 7 of them that were, having to be looked after.
And the important thing there is, as Nikki mentioned, I mean, she looks after the engineering part, she looks after the transformation jobs and everything. From my perspective, it's very key to provide a service to the bank 24/7. So our job is to ensure that we have a dedicated ingestion team which provides 24/7 support to the ingestion jobs. We have an infrastructure team which manages the cluster 24/7. And the backbone of that is that you have the correct alerting and monitoring set up in an automated manner so that, everything is monitored. So the roles and responsibilities are, diverse, but individual teams should know exactly what they are doing, and you should split those responsibilities. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult.
So at the moment, because this is a cloud era distribution that we're particularly talking about, we use BDR.
BDR, yeah.
If you read the rule book on BDR, which we didn't know about, by the way, until we found it much, much later, we're exceeding the capacity of BDR by the power of 10, approximately. Yeah, and we're thinking of alternate solutions now in that space, and I think that, we use distributed copy anyway between different clusters, and so we're fine with that, and that's a configurable event within our ingestion framework.
Yeah.
So potentially that's going to be the solution that we'll use depending on the requirement of timeliness of data.
So during our ingestion job completion, we want to do disk CP right at that point of time itself. So we do a disk copy. BDR, over the time, it has become slower and slower, and we know, as Nikki said, we have gone over the limit. So the platform can only scale up to a point. There are alternate solutions in the market. Most of you, there are a couple of stalls for, I think, WANdisco and IBM. They offer big replicate and all that. But again, it's what you want, what you prefer, and how you want to do it.
And I think it all depends on timeliness
Exactly.
as well. I mean, we've transitioned a lot of our analysts over to our second data center, and it's only those that really need the latest hours worth of data that should really be operating on our DC1. Yeah. So, no, we do single ingest into one cluster and then transfer the data across. I've worked on dual ingest in warehouses, plural, and it's not funny. It's not funny, and I don't want to do it again.
Still, you will always have who's the master, who's the slave. If one data center goes down, that will be a struggle.
And you then spend the rest of your life trying to work out if they're actually in sync or not. Yeah, so I've done that, and I did that for 6 years, and I hated every moment of it in the end, so I'm never doing it again. We still have our gateways are still they're replicated, and so we can still swap over the data coming from the mainframe. We can just re-SFTP to our other clusters. When we use a streaming architecture to the analytics data lake, which I don't really recommend in this scale, so that's what I call nearly reasonable time analytics. We dual ingest in that case and then we can always go back to our Kafka topics to replay if we needed to.
Yeah, so we have gateways on board the DCs, and we replicate data across the gateways as well. So the landing file comes. So what we have done is we have created a common layer now across all the 4 gateways. So any file comes, it comes to the common layer. So we don't need to actually do rsync or anything of the data because it's in the common layer. So that's a lesson we learned over a period of time. Yeah. And especially what we have done is, in the organization, this cannot be a Cat A environment. The jobs that run on it can be Cat A. So we have classified, say, around 1,000 regulatory jobs that we run are our Cat A. So in case of failure, we would focus on moving those jobs first and ensuring that those regulatory reportings are done and completed.
Any more questions? I think we're done for time. To get brand new data into the cluster. With the right executive approval behind it, it can happen really quickly. Yeah. If we just talk about a standard ingest, it's 2 to 4 weeks, but most of that time is gathering the metadata and creating the data dictionary and all of the other stuff, and identifying a data owner. So a lot of the journey that we've done on the big data platform has really solidified what we do from a data governance perspective, and I would say that we are massive contributors to data ownership within the organization.
And we are looking at automating that. It was a very manual process. We had an Excel sheet. We would fill it up with 200 fields. And what we started doing is we started splitting up each of the stage, and we first automated the job, which would be we automated the job for the ingestion, and we created a tool called Summit, which was developed in-house. And what that would do is it would create control M files and basically tell our control M team that now this job needs to be scheduled. So we piecemealed it, and now we are on a program called Star, in which we are automating the end-to-end pipeline for ingestion. And we are
and that's including the metadata.
That includes the metadata.
All of that stuff is already there for our user community to select.
Yeah, the struggle is to get that metadata. It's the business entities do we need to go and get in touch with.
Yeah, I think next presenters are coming. Thank you.
Thank you, cheers.